Hi, I'm Marc, and welcome to the weekly Outside Views report on the politics in Africa and Arabia. The leader of the women's wing of the Tanzanian ruling party, Mary Chitanda, has called for the castration of homosexual people. During celebrations to mark the second anniversary of the government of Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu Hassan it was, the politician said, "We call on the government to punish crimes related to same-sex activities harshly. These people should be castrated if found guilty." Chitanda is considered a conservative hardliner. However, she's not the only politician in the ruling Chama cha Mapinduzi party who has attracted attention with homophobic statements, such as former President John Magufuli, for example. 5 years ago, an appeal by a regional official in Dar es Salaam drew global attention after he set up a task force to allegedly test gay men. President Hassan initially did not comment on Chitanda's statements, though. Homosexual acts are banned in the East African country. Those convicted face several years in prison. The climate for gays and lesbians also worsened in other countries in the region. The Ugandan parliament is currently discussing the reintroduction of an anti-gay law. In early March, Kenya's President William Ruto criticized a decision by the Kenyan Supreme Court that had strengthened the rights of LGBTQ groups. According to the president, homosexuality has no place in Kenya. The English abbreviation LGBTQ stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans people, and queer people. And there's often star or plus and so on to mark more. According to Human Rights Watch, the situation of the LGBTQ community in Tanzania had deteriorated massively under Hassan's predecessor, John Magufuli. A young man was shot dead by police during violent clashes in western Kenya on Monday. According to the police, demonstrators attacked the security forces in the opposition stronghold of Maseno with stones. The police officers first used tear gas, and then they shot the demonstrators with live ammunition, killing the student William Mayange. Demonstrators also threw stones at the police in the capital Nairobi on Monday. AFP journalists watched as police used tear gas and water cannons against protesters and a motorcade led by opposition leader Raila Odinga. Around 24 people were arrested in the city center, including 2 opposition parliamentarians, as AFP journalists reported. "We came here peacefully, but they attacked us with tear gas," said 21-year-old protester Charles Odor. The protests are against inflation. Many people in Kenya are suffering from rising prices for basic foodstuffs, a sharp fall in the shilling, and a record drought. Opposition leader Raila Odinga had called for the demonstrations in view of the rising costs and what he calls the stolen election last year. President William Ruto won the extremely close vote, and Odinga describes Ruto's government as illegitimate. On Monday, the opposition leader in Nairobi announced weekly demonstrations and strikes to a cheering crowd. The international community is mobilizing 7 billion euros for the victims of the earthquake disaster in Turkey and Syria. Together, expectations have been exceeded, said EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen on Monday after a donor conference in Brussels. "When tragedy strikes, there's only one answer, and that is solidarity," she said. Germany alone announced that it would more than double the earthquake aid it had already provided for both countries to around 240 million euros. The greater part of this will go to Turkey because access and needs are much clearer and much simpler there than in northwest Syria, as State Secretary at the Federal Foreign Office Tobias Lindner told the German press agency. According to von der Leyen, the EU is supporting the reconstruction of Turkey with 1 billion euros from its budget. In addition, there is a further 108 million euros from humanitarian and initial reconstruction aid in the civil war region Syria. In total, the EU and its member states pledged 3.6 billion euros. The rest comes from the rest of the international community. Of the total around 6 billion euros in grants and loans will go to Turkey and almost 1 billion in grants to Syria. Fourth in the World Cup, Morocco is applying together with Spain and Portugal to host the 2030 World Cup. This was announced by King Mohammed VI, according to the Moroccan Association in Rwanda's capital, Kigali. The two European countries originally announced in October last year that they wanted to apply for the tournament together with Ukraine. The Spanish Association initially did not confirm the joint candidacy. The association said the three countries would meet in Rwanda before announcing any changes to the bid. British Home Secretary Braverman held talks in Rwanda about her government's plan to bring illegal asylum seekers to the African country. Before leaving for Kigali, the Tory politician stressed that her migration policy would prove a strong deterrent to dangerous and illegal travel. London wants to stop illegal entry via the English Channel. An agreement concluded with Rwanda last year is part of their strategy. The asylum applications are to be processed there and for Rwanda. People whose applications are approved should remain in Rwanda. The European Court of Human Rights stopped the first flight to Rwanda at the last minute in June. Last year, more than 45,000 people crossed the English Channel to Britain compared to 8,500 in 2020. President Ebrahim Raisi to a state visit, according to information from Tehran. Raisi's deputy chief of office, Mohammed Yamshidi, tweeted that the king welcomed the recent agreement to restore diplomatic ties between the two countries and invited the president to Riyadh. Raisi accepted the invitation, emphasizing Iran's willingness to expand cooperation between the two countries. A date for the planned visit was not initially given. Iran and Saudi Arabia want to resume diplomatic relations after 7 years of ice age. As a first step, a meeting of the foreign ministers of the rival countries was decided at the beginning of the month, which is to take place soon. Sunni Saudi Arabia and Shia majority Iran have not maintained diplomatic relations in recent years. Both countries are struggling for political and military influence in the region. According to the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, contaminated drinking water and a lack of sanitary infrastructure endanger the lives of many adolescents worldwide. Every day, more than 1,000 children under the age of 5 die worldwide from disease caused by unclean water, a lack of sanitation and poor hygiene, as UNICEF said on Monday in New York. According to a new analysis by the organization, 190 million children in 10 African countries are at risk. The situation is most serious in the West and Central African countries of Benin, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Chad, Ivory Coast, Guinea, Mali, Niger, Nigeria, and Somalia. Many of these countries suffer from instability and armed conflicts, making it even more difficult for children to have access to clean water and sanitation. March 22nd is the World Water Day, and the UN Water Conference in New York also starts on this day. The aim is to examine the extent to which internationally agreed goals, including the United Nations Sustainability Goal of access for all people to clean water by 2030, can be achieved. 2 billion people worldwide, that's 1 in 4 people, do not have clean water. The activities of the Russian Wagner group, the private military company close to the Kremlin, in several African countries are an open secret. What is far less well known is that the notorious group also has a political and economic agenda in Africa, according to a new report by the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, and already in more than a dozen countries. On the one hand, Wagner wanted to create anti-West sentiment and, on the other hand, to benefit economically, says the main author of the report, Julia Stanyard. Since Wagner's first documented military deployment in Africa in late 2017, the group, led by Russian oligarch Yevgeny Prigozhin, a close ally of Vladimir Putin, has expanded aggressively. In the meantime, Wagner is politically involved in more African countries than militarily, says Denyard, and often in exchange for mining concessions. And this concludes this week's report on African and Arabian politics. The next one is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.